usually you bow down to somebody that's in power and authority. And don't you know that as we walk through Joseph's story, it looks like God made a promise to him and then absolutely dropped him. His circumstances reflected nothing that God had spoken to him. And so if you were Joseph, you might just have been assuming that life could not get any worse. Because you see, where we left Joseph, his brothers had planned to kill him. They didn't, but they just dropped him in a pit. That's where we left him. And yet Genesis 39 will open with Joseph. He's going to be in Egypt. He is still a slave. He is still separated from the Father that loves him. And he is still a walking wounded man, right? His brothers did something to him that you just don't get over easily. That hurt. Whenever there is betrayal, whenever there is a threat against your life, that hurts. And so as we sit with the chapter this week, you may find yourself wondering just a little bit, like I got curious about the life of Joseph. And I found myself asking things that I hadn't really thought about before, like how long has Joseph been living this life? Well, we know that Joseph was 17 when his brothers sold him into slavery. We know that he was 30 when Pharaoh will eventually elevate him to a position of power. We also know from Genesis that he's going to spend about 2 years in prison before he gets to Pharaoh. And so what that leaves us with is time. It leaves us with about 10 to 11 years of just ordinary life. 10 years serving Potiphar's household. Now you think about that, and Genesis does a really good job of telling this in one chapter. And we can read this, 45 seconds? I don't know. But Joseph had to live this decade or 11 years, one day at a time. And sometimes the Bible will move through something so quickly that we're going to forget that the people in the chapter that are being written about, that they don't get that privilege, right? They actually have to spend the time living it. They can't just turn the page. Now it's chapter 40. We get to do that. But Joseph, he's living thousands of ordinary days. Days of just slogging through the grind. Things were probably boring. There were times when it was probably like, put the fires out. It's chaos in this house. There's probably times when he didn't know what to expect. There's times when he's being taught tools of the trade. Joseph is living these ordinary days. And if someone had walked into Potiphar's house like year 6, they wouldn't have probably seen something extraordinary. Not really. It would have looked very normal, very unremarkable. But sometimes it takes years before you understand something that God is doing. Some of you can probably relate. You're like, where was I 20 years ago? Has God been doing something in me in those last 20 years? Yeah, you probably can see that now when you couldn't in the moment. And sometimes it takes time. Time will tell the story of what God is up to. And most of us can relate to that because we're not living in these high glam stories. We're not living in slavery. We're not living in Pharaoh's house. We're just ordinary people. We live ordinary Tuesdays. We dust. We take out the trash. We're just ordinary. Our lives really don't seem to make headlines. And that's where Joseph lived too. And so this morning we're going to open up in Genesis 39, and we're going to read the first 6 verses. I almost said chapters, but no, verses. You're like, oh boy, did I bring my lunch? No. Okay, just 6 verses to start with. It's Genesis 39. This is the word of the Lord, and it says, Now Joseph had been taken down to Egypt. Potiphar, an Egyptian who was one of Pharaoh's officials, the captain of the guard, he bought him from the Ishmaelites who had taken him there. The Lord was with Joseph, so that he prospered. And he lived in the house of his Egyptian master. And when his master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord gave him success in everything he did, Joseph found favor in his eyes and became his attendant. Potiphar put him in charge of his household, and he entrusted to his care everything he owned. From the time he put him in charge of his household and of all he owned, the Lord blessed his household of the Egyptian because of Joseph. The blessing of the Lord was on everything Potiphar had, both in the house and in the field. So Potiphar, he left everything he had in Joseph's care. With Joseph in charge, he did not concern himself with anything except the food he ate. Now Joseph was well-built and handsome. Dot, dot, dot. All right. Let's not jump ahead of the story just yet, though. But one thing that we will notice as we read Genesis 39, that there's this phrase that appears 4 times in the chapter, and it says something like this: the Lord was with Joseph. Moses is writing this book, right? Moses is the author of the first 5 books. So if Moses is repeating something 4 times, I think he's inviting us, hey, pay attention here. Don't miss it. Don't miss it. I'm telling you something important. And so I'm going to say that a lot of sermons that focus on Genesis 39, I mean, it's not too hard to focus on the big thing, like, oh my gosh, what's going on with Potiphar's wife? Is this a story about temptation? Okay, yeah, that's definitely a part of the story. But Moses seems way more interested in something else. Moses seems way more interested that God is present. He's telling us, hey, don't forget about God. Like, we read these stories and they've got people in them, but really the main character is God. God is the one that we pay attention to. God is the one we fix our eyes on. We see how God is alive and how he moves and how he works. Pay attention. This is the key that everything is going to hinge on. And now, here's what fascinates me about this. Because at this point, I mean, Joseph's just a young man. He's 17 at the beginning. He's a teenager. You think about your own life at 17. Okay. He moves to a completely different culture. He moves to Egypt. It's got different rhythms. It's got different worship practices. It's got different clothing. It's got different speech. And I'm going to say that after a while, Joseph has every reason to become Egyptian, doesn't he? And nobody would blame him. Nobody would blame Joseph if he had decided, maybe Yahweh forgot me. Day after day, year after year, as he is living this out, he's thinking, nobody's coming to rescue me. Dad doesn't even know I'm alive. Egypt and its gods and its customs and its values, it sure seems to be my life now. I have to dress like them. I now have to speak like them. And you start to ask yourself, well, how long is it before Egypt feels normal? Before you wake up and do the same thing over and over and over again every day. And is it maybe a month? Is it a year? Is it 5 years? And Egypt just feels more like home than anything else. Because Joseph has likely spent a decade plus here. His clothes are Egyptian, works Egyptian. He may even sound more Egyptian than Hebrew. Everything around him is saying, buddy, you're becoming one of us. Embrace it. And I want you to pay attention as we read through the text. Because the deepest thing that Joseph doesn't know, the deepest thing that he knows, it isn't the culture, it isn't the dress, it isn't the speech. The deepest thing that Joseph seems to know about himself is, I belong to God. And that did not just happen overnight. That does not happen overnight to us. As we stay in the Word and as we are being washed by God's Spirit over and over again, this is something that gets formed over years. That's what's going on with Joseph. That is what God is up to. So keep your eyes open as we read the story. But let's also pay attention to Potiphar for a second. Because Potiphar isn't just some wealthy homeowner. Like, he's not just some random rich guy in the middle of a rich neighborhood. No, Potiphar is captain of Pharaoh's guard. One of the highest ranking officials in Egypt. And he probably hobnobbed with the highest ranking officials. They were probably in and out of his house. And so we look at Joseph. Where does Joseph fit in with this really rich guy that has a lot of power and who has Pharaoh's time and attention? Joseph has now gone from shepherding some sheep on the hillside to being inside one of the most influential households of the empire. Not of the city, not of the country, of actually that time, probably the world. And here's something that's really remarkable, because with all of Egypt's beauty and all of its lushness and all of its power and all of its authority, something happens and Potiphar begins to observe something in Joseph. Now we're told the Lord was with him. And we see Joseph acting righteously. We see God blessing everything that Joseph puts his hands to. And you know what? Potiphar sees it too. And it's not because Joseph is lucky. It's not because he's finally mastering the skills and what was hard in year 1 and by year 8 becomes real easy. It has nothing to do with that. It has everything to do with the fact that the Lord is with him. Even the pagans can see it. So that's where we're at. The Lord is with Joseph when we finish verse 7. And it says, after a while, his master's wife took notice of Joseph and said, come to bed with me. But he refused. With me in charge, he told her, my master does not concern himself with anything in the house. Everything he owns is entrusted to my care. No one is greater in this house than I am, and my master has withheld nothing from me except you, because you are his wife. How then could I do such a wicked thing and sin against God? And though she spoke to Joseph day after day, he refused to go to bed with her or even be with her. Well, one day, he went into the house to attend his duties, and none of the household servants was inside. She caught him by his cloak and said, come to bed with me. But he left his cloak in her hand and ran out of the house. Okay, this is the scene that everybody remembers, isn't it? This is the scene that sort of gets approached in Vacation Bible School, but you do it very delicately, right? You're like, oh, is this PG? It's definitely not G. Right? We come to this scene, and before you rush through it, pay attention to one little phrase, day after day. You ever notice that Moses doesn't just say it happened once? This was just one little temptation. No, this becomes part of Joseph's normal life. This isn't just one dramatic afternoon that involves his cloak. It wasn't just one isolated temptation. This became Joseph's daily reality. There is this woman who day after day, week after week, month after month, keeps pressuring him. We know a little bit about something. We know about living in a culture that will constantly tell us their truth over and over and over and over again. Joseph lives that. So here's the question that stays with me all week is, why does Joseph keep saying no? I mean, good for him. Good for him. But honestly, he has a lot of reasons to say yes, doesn't he? You think about Joseph's position. He is a slave. He is not in the land of his fathers. Yahweh does not appear to be anywhere around him. Potiphar's wife, she certainly holds a lot of power. She can make his life miserable. No one back home is going to know. Humanly speaking, like everything about this scenario is ripe for Joseph to step into the temptation and say yes. And no one in that culture is probably going to question his integrity. except God. And Joseph knows it. Because we listen carefully to his words. Joseph says, how then could I do such a wicked thing and sin against God? That's where he lands. Not, I might get caught by the captain of the Pharaoh's guard. That's my boss. He kind of kills people when they disobey. Not, I'm going to lose my position. This is a job that is really good for me. Like, I am top dog in this here household. And he's not asking, well, what will people think? Most people probably aren't really all going to care about Joseph's sexual integrity. But instead, what he does begin with, he's not asking any of those questions. He is asking, God, what do you think? Because after these 10 hidden years of him being quietly faithful, Joseph's deepest identity has not changed. He still belongs to the Lord. It reminds me of Jesus' words centuries later. Jesus is giving this little sermon called Sermon on the Mount. Matthew 6, he is going to repeat something multiple times. Jesus multiple times says, your Father who sees what is done in secret. Because you see, God does see the hidden moments of our lives. And Joseph, he just happens to be living them long before Jesus ever spoke them. Nobody else sees, nobody else cares, but the Father sees, and the Father cares. And so that raises a question for you and me this morning. Who are you becoming in the years nobody notices? Not when everybody's watching you and you get to perform and you get to play the role, you get to look like what you think people expect you to look like, but when no one is. It's interesting to think about. There's another detail in this story that I had actually never connected the dots before. Maybe you have, and I'm just slow to the game, but Joseph loses a second garment. Completely missed that for all these years. But his brothers had stripped away the robe that his father gave him. And now, Potiphar's wife, she grabs hold of his cloak. And it's twice now that Joseph has lost the clothing that gives him his identity. Genesis repeats this imagery twice, I think on purpose. Okay, so that robe at the get-go that his dad gave to him. And some people are like, is it colorful? Is it beautiful? Does it have long sleeves that indicate that he's not a field worker? There's something special about this coat. And what it tells everybody is that you're his favorite. That Joseph is Jacob's favored son. He gets treated differently. The cloak that identifies him as Potiphar's most trusted servant. I'm wondering if it's like a little bit of a uniform. I wonder if he's got something special. I don't know if he's got like stripes or stars. I don't know what he has, but my guess is that he didn't look like the lowliest field slave any longer. And now that cloak is gone. Both garments taken. And so that is his freedom. That's his reputation. That's his status. That all gets stripped away. And it's like everything that the world would use to describe Joseph is gone. Joseph, you're no longer the favored child. Joseph, you're no longer the pampered boy. Joseph, you're no longer the head of the household. Joseph, you're nothing. Except, who has he become? Because people can take away his robe, but they cannot take away his character. They can 100% imprison his body, throw him in a pit, do whatever. But they can't imprison the work that God is doing in his heart and in his mind. And that's why I don't think Genesis 39 is primarily a story about sexual temptation and a power struggle that's happening. I think it's about these 10 years of quiet formation that God is doing inside Joseph so that he becomes the person that knows how to handle what is thrown at him. Nobody wakes up with this kind of integrity. You don't just pop your eyes open one day and choose God's ways. Not when everything in you has been groomed and it's ingrained in you to live as the world lives. It's years of this quiet walking with God that's producing this response in Joseph. In Galatians 5, Paul's going to call it something like fruit of the Spirit. Paul's going to talk about what God living in you starts to look like, because once God is truly in you, he has to get out of you. And sometimes it looks like love. It looks like faithfulness. It looks like self-control. It looks like goodness. And here's the thing. Joseph isn't just manufacturing these qualities all on his own. God's been the one that's growing it in him. We can take a look at what Paul writes in Philippians 2:13 to me. He says, it is God who works in you to will and to act in order to fulfill his good purpose. Did you catch that? It's God who works in you. Not only around you, God's not only working in your circumstances, but he's doing something in you, changing you. Hold on to that goodness. And now let's close up the chapter. We're going to pop over to verse 19. We're going to see what's going on here. And it says, when his master heard the story, his wife told him, saying, this is how your slave treated me. He burned with anger. Joseph's master took him and put him in prison, the place where the king's prisoners were confined. But while Joseph was there in the prison, the Lord was with him. He showed him kindness and granted him favor in the eyes of the prison warden. And so the warden put Joseph in charge of all those held in prison, and he was made responsible for all that was done there. The warden paid no attention to anything under Joseph's care because the Lord was with Joseph, and he gave him success in whatever he did. And we close the chapter. Let me ask you this. Potiphar's wife just accused Joseph. Potiphar himself is pretty angry. It never says that he's angry at Joseph. And in fact, we see Potiphar putting him in the king's prison. And so that's where a lot of like the political threats would have been kept. Liars, schemers. People that did normal crimes, immediate execution. So I don't think Potiphar's necessarily all that angry with Joseph. He's angry. Angry enough to take action, but I think he knows his wife. I think he knows something's bigger going on. But Joseph still yet has to go to prison. He is still paying the consequence. And so if you were to meet Joseph walking into that prison that day, did you say his life was succeeding? Failing. I'm going to say this a little bit for Joseph. That does not read like a success story to me. Because if we're honest, especially in America, we want our happy endings. We always assume that obedience will make our lives easier. That's why we do it. Sort of. Joseph obeys. He listens to God. He does the right thing. And his circumstances get worse. But you notice what doesn't change? The Lord was with Joseph. This phrase appears 2 times before Joseph is in prison and 2 times after he is put in prison. What does that tell us? Well, I think that tells us that God's presence with Joseph is not dependent on Joseph's comfort level. It doesn't depend on his circumstances. It doesn't depend on his stage in life or even what his role is. God's with Joseph because God loves him. Joseph's circumstances changed, but God's presence sure didn't. And sometimes that's a lesson that we struggle to get our minds around. Sometimes I'm guilty of that. Like if I perform, if I do the right role, that's when I'm most loved by God. That's when God is most present. But that's not what the story teaches us. And in fact, another thing that we look at, sometimes I'm tempted to ask the question, what's God doing in my life? Because we can put that in our prayer request, like, Lord, I need help in this circumstance. I need help with my finances. I need help with this relationship. I need help with this health issue. I need help. I just need help. Amen. And God will always tell you, come to me with that. But I also think we're invited to ask another question too. I think Genesis 39 might be quietly asking us, what's God doing in me? Those are not the same question. Because one question is going to look at your circumstances, and the other question is going to look at character. One question wants immediate answers. Change this, Lord. Now the other one takes time. Maybe that's why we're looking at a sermon called Time Will Tell. Time's going to tell what God was growing that nobody could see yet. Time's going to tell whether your hidden faithfulness actually mattered. Time will tell you what God has been doing all along. Because as we look at the story of Joseph, nobody in Potiphar's house is knowing that Joseph is going to one day govern Egypt, that Joseph is one day going to be the second most powerful man in the empire. Joseph didn't know that. Potiphar didn't know that. Potiphar's wife certainly doesn't know that. But you know what? Every ordinary day, probably boring, God's shaping the kind of man that could someday carry that responsibility without being ruined by it. You think about who Joseph was as that arrogant, prideful, not so wise 17-year-old boasting about these beautiful dreams God had given to him. I don't think that young man would have handled being second most powerful very well. God's shaping Joseph because he knows Joseph is going to carry responsibility and he doesn't want it to crush him. So God's not only preparing a position for Joseph, but he's actually preparing a person. And I think about our own lives, and I realize that most of us kind of live more in the trenches of the day-to-day, normal, boring, unremarkable life that Joseph is living in Genesis 39 than the remarkable, beautiful headline like, I'm in charge. I'm the second in the land. That's usually not our lives. Most of us can relate to Joseph like just being very boring and having to do the hard things and taking out the trash and dusting the sideboards. Because most of our lives, right here in 2026, in the quarry, most of our lives are not lived on the mountaintops. A lot of our life is probably pretty hidden. Not hidden in like the shameful secret way, but just hidden from the sense that it's not a headline. It's us being faithful with what we have been given and each day as it comes. It's years of honest work. There are years of us praying. There's years of us choosing forgiveness. There's years of us doing the next faithful thing even when nobody sees it. It's not glamorous. And in fact, they feel pretty insignificant. And if you're not careful, you're going to start to devalue yourself and you're going to devalue everything about your life. But this chapter of Genesis, it's going to tell you, don't think that. It's not actually insignificant. Yeah, absolutely, the world is going to tell you, you're lame. That's boring. You need to be doing something different. All of our commercials are geared towards painting a picture of life that we think might be normal. Glamorous. In the spotlight. The world loves to measure productivity. You think about that, we are ingrained in that mentality from childhood. What are your grades based on in school? Productivity. How you growing, how you learning, you mastering this? Oh, here's the level that you mastered that at. Okay, what about as we grow up and now we're adults? Now the world is watching your resume. What have you achieved? What are your skills? What are you proficient at? And actually, that's what the world is interested in, but God is really interested in your soul. And time will tell what your soul is looking like. Because one day, people are going to start to see the fruit of what God's doing in you. And it won't be because you were chasing recognition, because you were like, I can do this task better than anybody else. It's not going to be anything like that. It's going to be because God was working in you all along, and you were faithful to it. You handled the small stuff as He gave it to you. It's God. It's God at the center. It's God. Just as Moses proclaimed, pay attention. God's presence is here. And so before we pray this morning, I want to just ask you a question. What are the hidden years in your what hidden years are you living right now? Not hidden and as shameful or secret or anything like that, but just hidden because it's quiet. Because it's simple. Where's faithfulness become altogether ordinary? Maybe where have you been quietly wondering, does any of this matter? Does it matter? Because it looks so boring. It looks so ordinary. It's just so quiet. I'm not doing anything great for the kingdom. Genesis 39 is going to answer this question with remarkable hope. Absolutely, your quiet life matters. Absolutely, your faithfulness matters. Absolutely, your ordinary obedience matters. Because why? Jesus tells us your Father sees. The Lord is with you. These hidden years, they're never wasted. Joseph couldn't quite see that palace, right? He could only see another prison. But time would tell. Time would tell that no, God has not abandoned him. Time would tell that every ordinary year had been shaping something extraordinary in him. And that's true for you and for me today in 2026. God is using our very ordinary life in Corey, Arkansas. And He's doing something remarkable in each one of us. God's doing some of His most deep work in the places where you least expect it because it just keeps repeating. It's just the repetition of time and time and time again. It's refining us. And I just want to encourage you this morning, God's not wasting your faithfulness, not one bit. Beloved, He's shaping you. He's shaping you into somebody that looks like Him. And as you reflect on maybe where you've been through the years, you're going to see the maturing and the growth that God has, He's created in you when you couldn't see it. When you couldn't see His hand. When you were 20 or 30 or 40 or 50, 60, 70, 80, if you're fading 90. God has been doing something in all those years. Don't miss what God's doing in you because it's so ordinary or maybe painful. Don't miss it. Time is going to tell. So I'm going to be quiet for about 30 seconds and we're going to turn to a time of prayer. I'm going to give you about 30 seconds, and if there's anything that the Lord has been putting His finger on, maybe you can be asking Him, Lord, what are you asking of me today? Well, how does this apply to me today? How do you want me to respond to you? I'm going to allow for this time for you and the Lord to talk, and we'll close in prayer. For some of us, the silence is awkward, and for others of us, this is maybe the one time of the week where we have actually sat still enough to hear God speak. God, we do thank you for speaking to us this morning. We thank you that you are alive and that you are well. God, we thank you that you pour out your truth and your beauty and your love into us. Lord, there are times when we get tired of just doing the same old thing over and over and over again. And we are tempted to believe the enemy's lies. It doesn't matter. It's a waste of time. It's a waste of your years. It's a waste of your skills and your abilities and your passions. Just a waste. And yet, we just want to say no. No, that's not true. Lord, we say yes, that you are shaping us. And we thank you for it. Lord, I pray that today you would give us the eyes to see exactly how you've been shaping us, how you've been building us for this moment of history, where you have been shaping in us a resilience, where you've been shaping in us fruit of the Spirit, and you're cultivating goodness and patience and self-control, and you're cultivating in us something that even the pagans of the world recognize is different. And we praise you for that, Lord. Oh my goodness. Thank you for shaping us and making us look more and more like you. And Lord, we're going to head out of this place, this church that's filled with believers, and we're going to head into just normal, everyday, worldly life. And so, God, I pray that we would be reminded of this truth, that you have shaped us and formed us for such a time as this. And as we go out of these doors, may we live like you are with us. May we live like the world will see that you shaped us. May we live looking like you. And we want to pray all of these things in the precious name of Jesus. And together we all say, amen. Amen. Beloved, go shine hope today. You're dismissed.